First question, it says, many here at rallies and protests reject a two-state solution, but some activists, far fewer, recommend two-state solution. Moving forward, what should the future look like for a free Palestine? If two-state solution is rejected, what would that look like? Where would Israelis go, or what would borders look like? What would or could government look like for a free Palestine?
Now that is a difficult question. I think that's it's in your expertise.
There's no mic. It's yeah.
So, yeah, is this on?
Yeah, it is on. Is it on?
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. That is a difficult question. I'm going to give you a non-answer. I don't really think it's up for us to decide. It's a question for the Palestinian people to decide through their representative organizations and institutions. A part of the problem is that the Palestinian national movement, more so than it ever has been before, is fractured. Of course, it's fractured between the West Bank and Gaza, between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and Israel has done everything it can to maintain that fracture to the maximum extent possible. In the West Bank, moreover, the Palestinian Authority is not really a representative organization. Most Palestinians believe, I think entirely correctly, that the Palestinian Authority is essentially a collaborationist regime with the Israelis. There was a period where the Palestinians were able to formulate, I think, pretty clear national goals, and that was during the First Intifada between December of 1987, stretching, sometimes people say, till 1993, but I think by 1990 it was essentially over. And that was made possible because all through the 1970s and into the 1980s, though Israel had banned Palestinian political organizations, the civil society organizations that were necessary for sustaining, at that time during the First Intifada, largely unarmed resistance, the civil society organizations necessary for mobilizing the Palestinian public around democratically agreed upon goals, those institutions existed. Women's groups, student unions, trade unions, you know it. What Israel very successfully did all through the Oslo period was it evacuated or vacated the West Bank of those institutions. If you look at Ramallah today, for example, it is perhaps the most NGOized country, or sorry, not country, city on the entire planet. And basically the Israelis intentionally allowed and enabled that to happen, because what you're doing is you're taking all the young Palestinians who would perhaps in some future serve as civil society leaders and organizers. You're putting them in a desk and you're getting them to churn out quarterly reports for unlimited numbers of NGOs, reports that will be read by nobody. So at the moment, you have that fragmentation. You lack the institutional, I think, structures, the representative structures that would be necessary for formulating clear Palestinian objectives, like long-term objectives. And I think that until those exist, it's not for me or for Samir or for anybody else to say this is what Palestinians should pursue. As far as I'm concerned, if Palestinians believe that a two-state settlement is possible and they choose to pursue that settlement, it's none of my business. Personally, I think as a political analyst, I don't think that settlement is possible anymore. But if Palestinians want to pursue it, that's their decision. And by the same token, it's very difficult to imagine at the current moment how a one-state settlement could emerge. You're asking the people of Gaza to live alongside their genociders. I don't think that in the short term that's going to be happening. But if a Palestinian national movement, a strong representative Palestinian national movement again emerges, maybe in a generation, maybe less, and formulates that demand, again, I don't think it's up to me to tell them no.
Yeah, I fully agree with everything you just said, Calder. I would say, in addition, that when we talk about a two-state solution, I think we can engage in a discussion of interpretation and conceptual clarification of what it means for there to be a state, because I think the discussion, from what I understand, and I'm not anywhere nearly as versed as you are on these issues, was that the Israelis would control Palestinian security, and that does not sound like a proper state. And so it's a kind of non-starter in terms of, I mean, logically, it's not a two-state solution. If one state controls the security of the other state, then that other state is not really a state, but some other thing. And so I think we can help by clarifying the terms of the discussion. But ultimately, yes, it's up to the Palestinians themselves, of course, to determine the nature of the dispensation. And I think it's absolutely right that what Israel is doing is destroying a lot of things, but one of the key things it's destroying is the possibility of imagining a future that could possibly exist, in which Jews and Muslims and Christians, Israelis, Palestinians, and others live together in a free Palestine. Right. And I think that this becomes material to our discussion because it has become so triggering, let's say, for Zionists to hear the slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That conjures images of their own destruction as a nation. But this is open to interpretation. And that the kind of claim to that land between the river and the sea is in the Likud constitution. So we have a kind of conflict of interpretation, right, of what does this mean? And I think there we can maybe support a little bit and say, let's try to all collectively imagine some future that would be egalitarian, that would be governed by equal civil rights, that would be just and peaceful. I think that's an important part of the discussion. Otherwise, it's very hard to get anywhere when everything's just shut down by, the slogan means that, of course, you're advocating the genocide of Jews and the genocide of Israelis. So I think this is important.
Dr. Gandasha, this question is for you. Do you see securitization of expression as either a component or endpoint of kinetic securitization? Example, policing of at-risk communities, military jurisdiction, or of occupied Palestine?
Okay, let me just take another look. Component, endpoint. Kinetic securitization. Absolutely. I mean, I think this is exactly what is going on. So is the securitization that I've been talking about something that exists in its kinetic form, meaning policing, actual forceful policing? Is this what's happening in occupied Palestine? 100%, yeah. Definitely, and I think it's a really good question. I mean, I think the answer is a resounding yes, but I think the question is really valuable to keep in mind because there are obviously certain learnings that are happening in that context, and they won't remain confined to that context. And this is something we knew when we were when I was living in London in the mid-'80s, struggling against apartheid, and always spending the weekends outside of the South African embassy protesting. I'm sure when I was there, I brushed shoulders with Jeremy Corbyn. What was going on was that the occupying British Army in the north of Ireland were taking a lot of the knowledge that they were gaining and a lot of the knowledge specifically about the technologies they were using to suppress Sinn Féin and the IRA, and using that at home. For example, also against the miners and other organizations that were contesting state power. So I think this is something that we need to think about, these connections. It takes a much, let's say, softer form here, but the parallels have to always be kept in mind. A colleague of mine, a Brazilian colleague of mine, who's spoken out very bravely against Bolsonaro. He's a philosopher and musician and an artist, and he talks about Gaza as a kind of new laboratory, just as Pinochet's Chile was a neoliberal laboratory after the coup in 1973, which then, of course, spread around the world. Gaza itself is a kind of laboratory, and we don't exactly know what is going to follow, but it's quite foreboding. I think it's worrying. So I think this is a really good question.
This question is about freedom of expression in grad school settings. How do we do it effectively?
You're more recently from grad school. Do you want to? You don't have to
think.
Yeah, of course. So how do we push back against the undermining of freedom of expression in grad schools? And I'd say also, I think graduate students, as apprentice academics, as apprentice professors, do have a degree of academic freedom, but not full academic freedom that tenure track and then especially tenured professors have. And I think the difference between academic freedom, a key difference between academic freedom and freedom of expression within the public sphere, is that our academic freedom hinges upon a certain kind of expertise, a claim to expertise. So I think this is important. And I think, everything you were saying, Calder, about the evidentiary basis of claims, I think this is crucial. And I think this is what graduate students need to focus on, maybe more than your given graduates, I'm speaking from experience, your given graduate student is want to do. I think as a graduate student, you tend to be quite enthusiastic. You have often you have a kind of radical agenda, and you want to make your points very, let's say, forceful, but without necessarily having that evidentiary basis initially. You just want to get out there. And I think it's really especially important today to do to show your work, let's say. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just touch on a point that you made in your presentation, and I think we really need to think deeply about. I think one of the best defenses you can have against attempts to shut down your freedom of speech in really any context, including at grad school, is to be consistent and principled in your defense of free speech. And that means defending the free speech of people you despise, people you really, really don't like. While I was at grad school at the University of Exeter, I think her name was Katie Hopkins, was invited. Yeah, exactly. She was invited by one or another student organization to speak at the University of Exeter, and there were a large number of my colleagues who signed a petition to have the university prevent her from speaking. I opposed it. I did so as a matter of principle, not because I think there's any real value to what she has to say, or because I think that there's any sympathy we should have for her views, but because I was unwilling to hand the university administration the power to make decisions about what is acceptable speech on campus. Because it happened, of course, within a few months that our local branch of Students for Justice in Palestine, or basically the equivalent in Exeter, tried to invite a speaker. And suddenly now in the UK, they have this prevent program. We're being told, the event's going to make potentially students feel unsafe. And suddenly all sorts of restrictions are being put up by the administration to try and prevent the event from going forward. And I think that's only made easier for them if you've already accepted the principle that university administrators can decide by fiat what views are going to be heard and what views are not going to be heard. So I think a principled commitment to free speech protects your free speech and also makes your claim to free speech appear legitimate in the eyes of the broad student body and the public in general. If you're viewed as the one who is committed to free speech and you're the one being canceled, in general, I think, you gain a large degree of support from the broad public. On the other hand, even if the views you're opposing are reprehensible, if you're trying to force those people to be silent, I think that all too often the response of the public is to think, well, if you're trying to silence those views, maybe they're saying something right. Right?
If I could just make two quick points. I know we got a lot of questions, but this reminds me of a couple of points. And one is that we really do, and this is only reinforcing your entire presentation, we really need to have the courage of our convictions. And I think the best example from the late 1960s was the appearance of Huey Newton, one of the Black Panther founders, one of the founders of the Black Panther Party, who appeared on, I think it was firing line with William F. Buckley Jr. And he pastes the wall with Buckley by saying, so during the American Revolution, you would have been on the side of the monarchy, wouldn't you? Because Buckley was pushing him. So you're a revolutionary. I see. And he said, yes, of course I was. And I would have been on the side of the revolutionaries at that time, and you would have been defending the monarchy. It was brilliant. Right? It was brilliant. It was William F. Buckley Jr.'s own show, and Huey Newton just decimated him, and it was just fantastic. It's on YouTube. Take a look. Today, I'm not going to talk to him. He's racist. He was, no doubt, an awful racist, but he was also an intelligent man, and he engaged. So you got to go. You got to go and have it out. Today, what I see in graduate schools far too much is, well, I'm not going to do the emotional labor. You do the research. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to educate you unless you pay me. It's like, sorry, that's a non-starter. That's not politics. It's something else. Self-care, whatever it is, it's not politics. And we need more of that precisely. We need to engage in dialogue and discourse and argument.
This question is about resources. The question is, are there books, speakers, authors you can recommend regarding understanding cancel culture and identity politics? Can you expand on your remarks on these two topics?
Oh, do you want to go?
Books and resources. Think a moment.
Norman Finkelstein. He's written a book, I think it's called Cancel This, isn't it?
No, it's called I'll burn that bridge when I get there.
That's it, yeah. But that's a kind of head-on engagement with cancel culture. There's been a lot of stuff written on identity politics, which is very close to this. But off the top, I'd actually have to think about it. I've written a few pieces on the way in which in the art world there's been this kind of rush to cancel, to burn, to destroy works of art, as if their existence was in and of itself harmful, and it's just quite mad. People don't seem to want to be able to interpret things, and curators and museum directors and so on, philanthropists, or let's say fundraisers, they are very worried that people will get the wrong message from the artwork, and then that will be hugely upsetting, and there will be demonstrations and protests against the museum, and this is where we are today. So But if people want to contact me about this, I'll have some resources. It's just right now I can't think of it. But can you? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say every young person should read John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. The first section of it, for sure, on freedom of speech. It's a very, very powerful argument. I go back to it every couple of years because you have to really grapple with the argument and go over it again and again and again. And I think that there should be a recognition that this commitment to free speech is not the province of the political right in the United States. I think that there is that kind of perception, I guess you could say now. But if we look at it in kind of the long frame of history, the commitment to free speech, free discourse is one that was part and parcel of the left going way back, right? Rosa Luxemburg, freedom is for the one who thinks differently. You can find it even in the writings of Marx. It's certainly there in Noam Chomsky. It's there in Bertrand Russell, and so on. So I think that we shouldn't be skeptical of free speech claims as being motivated by some kind of right-wing politics. There's a long left-wing tradition that is very, very vociferous in its defense of free speech as a fundamental right in any decent society.
That also reminds me that we organized with somebody that people might know, quite a well-known writer, playwright, activist, Carmen Aguirre. She actually organized this event on freedom of speech, voices from the left, and there's a video of that available. It's a really terrific discussion. The irony is that there were certain people who wanted to cancel the event on cancel culture. Not surprising. And then we also had another young woman who identifies as lesbian, and she was canceled by a former partner of hers, and that led to her losing her job and losing friends and having to leave the country for a while. And then she organized something with the hosts of this podcast called Fucking Cancelled, and that was organized through the Institute, and I know it was about 200 people there, and she was called a racist for organizing this event. These were people approaching the question of cancel culture from the left, very much part of a critical kind of post-Marxist approach to cancel culture. The book that I like the best on this, from a communist playwright, Bertolt Brecht, is Life of Galileo, where he shows the way in which Galileo is canceled by the church, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant play. I'd highly recommend it.
I think we have time for one last question. And the question is, how do we best help rebuild Palestine, Gaza, on the ground, in person, organizations here at home? Is it appropriate to want to help on the ground in Gaza, travel there and use our skills on labor to volunteer?
You can start with
that. I'm not certain I can say whether it's appropriate to travel to Gaza and to work on the ground there. I think that's kind of an individual choice that somebody needs to make based on their own personal circumstances and means. But what I would say is that at the moment, the priority is for us to work as hard as we can to ensure that that ceasefire, that incredibly tenuous, precarious ceasefire continues to hold. I'm sure as many of you keep close tabs on the news, the Israelis, the American president, Donald Trump, have given Hamas an ultimatum that unless they release the hostages by, I believe it's Saturday, the genocide is going to resume. Hamas, on the other hand, stopped the hostage transfers because as it put it to the mediators of the ceasefire, Israel wasn't upholding its end of the bargain. For those of you who aren't aware, the ceasefire is meant to basically work according to a kind of three-stage structure. The first stage is the stage we're looking at now, in which 33 of the Israeli hostages are supposed to be released in return for the release of what Israel calls Palestinian prisoners, but we should appropriately term Palestinian hostages, thousands of Palestinian hostages. And amidst this stage one, they're supposed to be planning for and negotiations over a second stage in which the remainder of the hostages on both sides will be released, in addition to a permanent ceasefire setting in. The state of Israel has delayed already by a week any talks or negotiations about that second stage of the ceasefire. It has not upheld the temporary ceasefire that is in place now. It's continued to carry out atrocities against the people in Gaza. And I think Hamas, quite justifiably, is unwilling to continue on with these hostage transfers if it has no guarantee that it cannot guarantee for the Palestinian people in Gaza that at the end of these hostage transfers, Israel is not just going to restart the genocide. So I think our role now is to put pressure on our government and through our government on the American government in particular to ensure to put the Israelis under pressure to continue on with the ceasefire as it is now and to move on to stage 2 and stage 3. And I think once that kind of immediate and pressing issue is dealt with, then we can begin to talk about the much larger project of finding a way to rebuild Gaza. As I said in my talk, it's an astronomical task. 15 years to clear all that rubble, 50 million tons of it. And as we all know, the Israelis are going to be highly, highly resistant to allowing any aid into Gaza to rebuild. In 2012, Ehud Barak, who was at that point in time, I believe, the defense minister of the state of Israel, when a ceasefire was signed, he stated that every time we sign a ceasefire with Hamas, within a week, nobody knows what was in the ceasefire, and Israel just continues to violate it. That happened in 2008 after Operation Cast Lead. It happened in 2012 after Operation Pillar of Defense. It happened in 2014 after Operation Protective Edge. It's the same cycle over and over again. Israel provoked the Palestinians until rockets began to fly. It then carried out a lethal operation, a high-tech massacre against the people in Gaza. Another ceasefire was signed. The Palestinians upheld their end of the ceasefire. The Israelis violate it every step of the way. So our goal, I think, our primary objective now has to be to try and break that cycle, to ensure that the ceasefire, as it's agreed, is actually carried out.
I agree 100%. I really don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, Dr. Coulter Lowers and Dr. Samir Gandesha, thank you so much for all this information, and we appreciate all your work. It's not only a gift to us, but also to the world. Amnesty Vancouver would like to give you a small gift just to say thank you. That's for you, Dr. Samir.
Oh, thank you very
That's
much.
for you, Dr. Coulter.
Completely
You're
unnecessary, but thank you.
And for our amazing audience, thank you so much for being here tonight. If you haven't already, please follow Amnesty Vancouver on Facebook and on Instagram. And we are aware that many amazing causes and good causes are competing for our attention. And it's hard sometimes to decide where to support. but we're asking that you consider to support Amnesty International for all the amazing work they are doing, as to consider them as one of those important causes. Amnesty International is one of the only human rights organizations still on the ground monitoring the human rights and humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip. And without sustained funding, they can't keep going and keep doing the amazing job they are doing. Whatever you're donating, it's going into their specialized expertise, advanced technology, staff on the ground, and safety measures. And we ask you just one last bit to leave you with. If our leaders are not taking action to protect human rights, it must be us. If you want to consider donating, you can see Katrina. She's with the pink keffiyeh in the back. There's a cash box and there is QR code. And thank you so much for being here. And hopefully we'll see you in other events as well. Thank you.